listen to your heart. Your heart is never wrong. Always face the truth. Your heart won't lead you home.
Welcome to Soul Wealth, wealthy conversations that nurture the soul. Get ready for an enlightening conversation that will nurture your soul and help you live your best life. Now, here's your host, Dr. Vicki Johnson.
Welcome to the Soul Wealth Radio Show. I am your host, Dr. Vicki Johnson, and super excited to be back on dcradio.gov and 96.3 HD4. Once again, as we've had in the past, I have an amazing guest today who is a first-generation Haitian-American. Born and raised in Massachusetts, she obtained a Bachelor of Science degree from Emerson College in Boston. Prior to graduating, she spent her second semester of her senior year interning at the ABC News Bureau in Washington, D.C. She realized that she needed to stay in the D.C. area in order to propel her journalism career to the next level. After graduating from Emerson, she became a news producer for News 21 in Montgomery County, Maryland, and soon after that, a news producer for Baltimore, Maryland, CBS-owned and operated television station WJZ TV 13. Her career has spanned into the online world. During the turn of the century, she became the interactive producer for Discovery Communications, where her role entailed creating high-speed internet content to support the corporation's networks such as Discovery Channel, TLC, and Animal Planet. In 2017, this is what I find so amazing about my guest today. She went back to her journalism roots and produced a television special for Prince George's Community Television in Maryland called Spotlight: Domestic Violence. This 45-minute news magazine formatted show garnered 3 Telly Awards. So she's an award-winning journalist in the categories of writing, news documentary, and news special. But this right here is going to blow you away because it blew me away, right? In 2018, she obtained her Juris Doctorate degree from the University of the District of Columbia David A. Clarke School of Law. And presently, my guest today is the Legislative and Policy Advisor for DC's Office of Cable Television, Film, Music, and Entertainment. That is phenomenal, but what is most amazing about that is beyond her professional career. She loves to travel internationally, I might add, and is a proud wife and mother of 3 children. She takes her role as mom-in-chief critically and continuously aspires to new heights. Welcome to the Soul Wealth Radio Show, DAnnette Roy.
Thank you, Ms. Vicki Johnson, and thank you for that introduction.
I wanted to read every word because it's powerful. I think sometimes we dim our light when we are being talked about, right? Or someone else is celebrating our accomplishments, particularly as women and then women of color. You know, we play down our capacity and often, oh, you don't have to do all of that. You don't have to read all of that. But I want to celebrate you, DAnnette, because I watched you work full-time, be a full-time law school student, a wife, and a mother. That, I was like, who is this woman? Where did she come from? And, you know, we all do a lot of things. But you did all of that with such grace and such class. So I celebrate you.
Thank you.
And I'm happy that you're here as our guest today on the Soul Wealth Radio Show. So what was it like? What is it like being a first-generation Haitian-American? Did your parents grow up in Haiti and then come here and you were born here? Talk about that experience because that's really unique.
Well, again, thank you for having me on the show. And,
You're welcome.
you know, that question is a great one to begin with because I think that identity, for me at least, is everything. Mm-hmm. And so I always like to lead with the fact that I am Haitian-American, because oftentimes when we think of Haiti, we have this stigma of it being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And I wanted to dispel that a lot. And so to answer your question, I was actually born and raised in the United States. My parents migrated to the U.S. back in the early to mid-60s. My grandmother actually came first and then sent for my mom and her siblings. And then on my father's side, pretty similar situation. My father came probably more so in the early 70s or so. And so it is a wonderful experience in so many ways. I often like to tell people that although I was born in the U.S., there's just so many things that are so Haitian about me, and that, sleepovers was something that was like, no. Why would you sleep over at anyone's house? You have a home, You don't need to sleep over anyone's house. We don't do that. And so now, fast forward that I am a mother, oftentimes, can we have play dates? Can, Zaina sleep over the house or anything? And I battle with that. So even though I'm American, and that's a part of me that I embrace and encompass, being African American, there's that. It's like you're almost playing a dual role, and you have to balance and navigate things. There's so many things that I cherish about being both.
That's awesome. What a blessing. It's like a double blessing that you get to live inside two cultures simultaneously. I know the food is good. Referencing your law school graduation celebration, I mean the feast that was prepared mainly by your family, if I remember, was incredible and tasty. So do you like to cook as well? Like, are you into the colorful diversity of your culture is what I want to say, because, I grew up in South Florida, and I grew up with a lot of Haitians who were also first generation Haitian-Americans and or came, migrated when they were children. So, from the fruit to the rice to the beans, like the fun, the music, the creativity is such a beautiful heritage to have. And you're right. The images that are shared with us predominantly are that of poverty, despair, right? But there's so much more to the Haitian culture. And so if you could dispel some myths and educate us, what are some things that you want the Soul Wealth family to know about the Haitian culture, besides your resilience, because that is really obvious to me?
So many layers to that question. And so I'd like to begin with your first question. Do I love to cook? Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that that's a combination of both me being Haitian and both me being African American as well, because I think that our love language as a people, that's how you express your love for someone, one another. And so oftentimes growing up, everything was a feast. If we wanted to celebrate something, it was, hey, your moms, your aunties, yourself, you all convene and get into the kitchen and cook. And so at my household, yes, you will be eating the rice and beans, the black rice that you had and loved so much that I promise I'll bring in one day. And so that's just part of who I am. And so that's how I love to embrace my culture. But there's also, being Haitian, there's so much more to it than simply the cuisine. That's
Absolutely.
A big part of it. But like you said, Haiti was the first Black republic. And a lot of times that light is dimmed on us, because being Black and being a Black nation back in the 1804, when we won our independence, no other nation wanted to embrace or accept that. And so I think that fast forward to the 21st century, we're still paying a price for that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted you to educate us. That was a very intentional question. What inspires you? Who inspires you?
What inspires me? oftentimes it's my grandmother, who's my maternal grandmother, who passed away very early on in the millennium. I mean, this was a woman, like I said, who came here from Haiti back in the early 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
She had probably the equivalent of a third grade education, and she was a single woman, a single mom. My grandfather had passed well before she had come here to the United States. And she was able to bring in her 3 adult children and make a way for herself. And when I tell you, my grandmother was not that quintessential grandma, loving doty kind of. That's not how she showed her love. She showed her love by, again, cooking was a big thing for her. And then also just trying to do the best that she could with what she had. And so if you can only imagine back in the 1960s, you're talking about during the civil rights era, being Black and American was challenging enough.
Right.
But then on top of this, you're Black, you're coming from another country, a third world nation, you don't speak the language, and yet she was able to provide for her adult children, and I am a byproduct of that as well.
That's powerful. Talk about resourcefulness and resilience. What has been one of your greatest lessons in life thus far? And if you have more than one, that's perfectly fine for you to share that. But share with us, if you will, a lesson that was a defining moment for you.
I think there's a saying that we make plans and God laughs at our plans sometimes. And I think often enough, as I've become into adulthood, I realize that the way you want to plan something, a plan is already out there for you. You know, God has destined us all to be great, but it's not while in our time, our own time. You know, like you said, I recently went to law school. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to take the bar and I'm going to pass the bar and I'm going to become an attorney. Well, that was not in God's plans. So I did the first couple of steps, but unfortunately, I did not pass the bar the first time around. And it was just a very humbling experience.
Talk about that. Talk about that after you made such an investment and sacrifice. I watched you do it. You know, it was amazing to me on a daily basis to watch you come to work, leave work, headed to class, being a wife, being a mother of 3 school-age children, mind you, and then studying for the bar. How have you been able to navigate what I'm sure was a moment of disappointment, yet keep going? Talk about that.
You know, like you said, it was a huge sacrifice, not just for myself, you know, putting in the hours of studying, you know, being a mom, working full time, but it was a sacrifice to my family as well. Because when you go to law school or any type of profession, you know, it's not just the 3 or 4 years of being in school itself. It's studying for the LSAT prior to. It's studying for the bar after graduating. And so you're talking about a total of 5.5, 6 years that my family had to sacrifice as well. When I just came into law school, my daughter was not even 2 years old yet. And so the majority of her existence, I was in school. She would see me perhaps an hour, perhaps 2 a day. And so it was a very, very humbling experience. And it's not the first time in life that I quote unquote failed. But what it taught me was that within every, so to speak, failure, you have to see what other ways you can navigate through that. And don't let that be what holds you back. And so when I got the results back from the bar, I looked at my husband looked at me, he's like, we're going to go out and celebrate. Yeah. I was like, celebrate what? My failure? What is there to celebrate? He says, despite it all, you're still standing.
Yeah.
And it made me think of that Elton John song, I'm Still Standing.
And you graduated from law school.
Exactly.
Hello? That's not something that people do.
Yes.
every day, so easily at that. And I believe that everything happens when it's supposed to happen.
Precisely.
Just like not passing the bar has not stopped you from moving forward at all. You're still in a thriving career, still being an amazing mom to your children. And if you decide to go and take the bar again, you can, or you can choose to do something else. So not passing the bar the first time was a defining moment for you, and you've been able to move forward through that. And I think that's a powerful soul wealth tip, is to not quit, not give up, keep going.
And eyes are watching you. I have little ones who depend on me, and they're seeing me. And so I wanted to share with them. I said, okay, I didn't pass the first time around, but that's okay. And so for them to realize that, hey, even as an adult, there may be things that you don't succeed at first, but then just try and try again.
Here's another question for you, DAnnette. What moment changed your life forever?
I would have to say losing my mom at 10 years old was a very defining moment in my life, because at age 10, I realized that I had to grow up faster than, my peers. And so I have a very good friend of mine who I grew up with who happens to be Haitian too, Haitian-American. And I saw her recently, and she said to me, DAnnette, I remember you balancing checkbooks at 12, 13 years old. Well, again, being from an immigrant family and my grandmother not knowing how to read and write in English, I'd have to go to the bank with her to do withdrawals, do deposits, pay rent, and all of that stuff. But I didn't even realize that this was a defining moment in my life.
Right.
Until now that I look at it, it's like when I see what my children are doing and when I was their age, what I was doing, yes, it is significantly different. But I bring that up only to say that when you're a quote-unquote motherless child, there are other surrogates that are around too. There were so many people that had stepped in and became that surrogate mom for me, that although, of course, I would always, who does not want their mom around? But I wasn't missing everything. And I remember when my oldest, who's now going to be 18, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I remember being pregnant with him, and I kept on having dreams about my mother.
Wow.
Kept on having dreams about my mother. And there was a part of me that kind of felt insecure, like, well, I didn't have a mom growing up. How am I going to be a mom if I didn't have a role model? And I remember I had a dream of her, and that was the very last dream that I had. And she was sitting in a rocking chair and just kept on rocking, and what looked like a baby in her hand. And I turned to her and I said, Mom, I said, whose baby is that? She's like, that's your baby. I said, wait a minute, I'm pregnant. She's like, no, that's your baby. And I said, well, you're not here. How are you holding my baby? And she says, I never left you.
Wow.
I never left you. You look like me. You sometimes act like me. I am here. And it was just such a poignant moment in my life where it was like, even though I lost her at the age of 10, she gave me everything I needed within that short period of time that I was going to be an all right mom, or the best mom that I could possibly be. And I honestly feel that I am, Vicki.
That's so awesome. Let me tell you why. I'm sitting here in awe, because when I was pregnant with my daughter, I dreamed of my grandmother, who at that time had been deceased 10 years. She passed when I was a senior in high school. And from the time she passed until I was pregnant with my daughter, 10 years later, I had never dreamed of her. And so you describing the conversation with your mother is very real to me, because I have not dreamed of my grandmother since. But the conversation was so vivid. It was so vivid. And in the dream, my grandmother said to me, "That's my baby." And I said,
Wow.
"What do you mean?" She said, "That's my baby. I am her guardian angel." And when I tell you, my daughter looks like her, acts like her, smiles like her, is very close to my father, her grandfather, which that was his mother. That is a very real experience. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And my daughter is 26.
Wow.
So that deeply resonates with me. What I also found so beautiful is your mother saying, "I never left you." And that I know is comforting to someone right now who's listening, who may be stuck in grief, grieving, who may have recently lost their mom or someone that they love, to know that when loved ones transition, they're still with us, is a really powerful recognition and awareness to have. So thank you for sharing that, because that's really deeply resonant with me. And I know it's nurturing someone or several people right now, DAnnette. That's really beautiful that you share. Before, we get to the end of the conversation, because when it gets good, it gets really good. And, you lose track of time. One of the things I also admire about you and your family is how you all travel. Like when I say nothing stops you and your entire family from going to Africa like you just went to Disney World. Like, it's amazing to me. You come in, you've been missing for a few days. Where are you just coming from? Oh, we went to Egypt. What? Like, I admire that. Talk about, where did that come from? Like, you and your family, not just you and your husband. I'm like, was it just you and your husband? No, we took the kids. I'm like, what? What led to that? Because that is powerful. It's like, we're going to see the world. We're going to take our children. We're going to expose them to, like, if it's in your mind, you all just do it. I can't even say it's in your future. I used to say, if it's in your mind, it's in your future. But it's like you and your husband, it's like, if you all think of it, okay, well, let's look it up. Let's go. Where did that come from? Because that's so awesome.
Well, growing up in a considerably low-income household, and an immigrant household at that, traveling was more purpose-driven.
Okay.
You're going to go see your aunt, who happens to live in New York. And mom is working, and so you're going to spend the summer in New York at your aunt's house. And so it was never for leisure, if you will.
Okay.
It was always purpose-driven. By the time I turned 18, I'd been to Boston, Florida, New York, and Haiti, and Canada. I can't forget Canada. But that was because we had family there, and so you were visiting, again, purposeful. It wasn't just because. And so when I got my first taste, it was actually on a cruise my sister took me on for my birthday.
Okay.
My first cruise, and with cruises, you go to 3 or 4 different places. And so we were in Jamaica, Cancun, and all. And I was like, this is the world. This is not the world in a textbook. This is the world.
So let me frame that for a minute. So exposure is everything.
Exposure is everything. And so I would, you talk about us taking our children. I will take my children out of school for a couple of days here and there, with hopefully a weekend in between, to take them to see something, because it's better to witness it with your own eyes.
Yeah.
If you're learning about the Egyptian pyramids, it's better to see it, if you can, see it with your own eyes versus looking at a paragraph in a textbook or a history book. And so that's really my motivation. It's like,
I'm tickled by it. Like, I can walk by, DAnnette, where did you just come from? Like, what? Name some of the places that you've been. Just name a few places, because a lot of people listening really don't leave their neighborhood. They don't leave the city. And exposure is everything. And if you can dream it, you can have it. There's nothing stopping you from that. So share, where are some of the places you've been?
Well, started out like just going to the Caribbean because that's definitely cheaper and closer by. And so a lot of the Caribbean islands I've been to. I've been to Africa. We went to Senegal. That was the first time that I'd ever been to Africa about 20 years ago. And the embrace as an African American, and then when they found out that I was Haitian on top of that, it was all she wrote. And so they were just so welcoming. And if you haven't traveled to Africa at all as a Black person, there's just a feeling that is undescribable. I really felt like this was home, more so than Haiti even. And I've been to Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania. I've been to Europe, Italy, Greece, a few other places that I don't come to the tip of my tongue right now.
But listen, just listen to the list, right? That is powerful. And you took your children, for the most part. Like, that to me is awesome, DAnnette, and very inspiring. And I'm sure people who are listening appreciate hearing what's possible. Sometimes all you have to do is hear someone else say it to know that it's possible, because it's easy to fall into, oh, that will never happen for me, or I can't do that, or I never dreamed that. I never thought to do that because I'm so busy surviving. I never thought about what thriving looks like, what living inside my dream looks like. Before we close, share what are you grateful for?
I am grateful for my existence. I am grateful for my parents who decided to come together for my existence. I am thankful for life in general. I am thankful to God for giving me such a wonderful family. I am thankful for people like you who inspire me. I mean, you talk about me inspiring you. It's like, come on, Dr. Vicki. The first time I ever met you, and I sincerely mean this, I felt at ease. And coming into a new environment, sometimes you feel that nervous jitter, like I don't know anyone, like the new kid in school. And you have just been such a level of calmness. Whenever I want to freak out, you're like, well, look at it this way. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying yes to being a guest here on the Soul Wealth Radio Show. I'm so grateful to have you and to be able to share you with the world and your journey and your testimony. It is so inspiring. I'm just grateful to be able to work with you on a daily basis.
Same
and
here.
Just expose the Soul Wealth family who's listening to what's possible. So thank you, DAnnette.
Thank you.
DAnnette Roy, mother, wife, law school graduate, amazing world traveler, and a resilient soul. Thank you. I appreciate you for being here on the Soul Wealth Radio Show here on dcradio.gov and 96.3 HD4. I am your host, Dr. Vicki Johnson, and I invite you to visit my website, vickijohnson.com. That's VIKKI Johnson.com, where you can get a copy of my most recent book, Soul Wealth, Finding Vision, Compassion, Authenticity, Abundance, and Legacy in the Midst of Chaos. Listen, soul wealth is your birthright. So go out, live full on purpose so you can die empty. Until next time, peace.
You've been listening to Soul Wealth, wealthy conversations that nurture the soul with Dr. Vicki Johnson. Soul Wealth is not just a brand, it's a lifestyle of vision, compassion, authenticity, abundance, and legacy created one conversation, one choice at a time. For more information, visit VickiJohnson.com or click on Soul Wealth at dcradio.gov.